You can talk all you want about Russia, which was all a, fake news, fabricated deal to try and make up for the loss of the Democrats, and the press plays right into it. In fact, I saw a couple of the people that were supposedly involved with all of this. They know nothing about it. They weren't in Russia. They never made a phone call to Russia. They never received a phone call. It's all fake news. It's all fake news. Well, the leaks are real. You're the one that wrote about them and reported them. I mean, the leaks are real. You know what they said. You saw it. And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake.
Yes or no answer on one of these questions involving Russia. Can you say whether you are aware that anyone who advised your campaign had contacts with Russia during the course of the election?
Well, I told you, General Flynn obviously was dealing, so that's one person, but he was dealing as he should have been.
During the election?
No, nobody that I know of.
So you're not aware of any contacts during the course of the election?
How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is
on
a
it?
ruse. Yeah, I know you have to get up and ask a question, so important. Russia is a ruse. I have nothing to do with Russia. Haven't made a phone call to Russia in years. Don't speak to people from Russia. Not that I wouldn't, I just have nobody to speak to. I spoke to Putin twice. He called me on the election, I told you this, and he called me on the inauguration a few days ago. We had a very good talk, especially the second one. Lasted for a pretty long period of time. I'm sure you probably get it because it was classified, so I'm sure everybody in this room perhaps has it. But we had a very, very good talk. I have nothing to do with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does. Now, Manafort has totally denied it. He denied it. Now, people knew that he was a consultant over in that part of the world for a while, but not for Russia. I think he represented Ukraine or people having to do with Ukraine or people that, whoever. But people knew that. Everybody knew that.
What more can you tell us about this breaking news?
Well, we're learning, Don, that high-level advisors close to then presidential nominee Donald Trump were in frequent communication during the campaign with Russians known to U.S. intelligence. This is according to multiple current and former intelligence, law enforcement, and administration officials that have been talking to myself as well as my colleague Jim Sciutto. And both the frequency of these communications and the proximity to Mr. Trump during the campaign of those involved raised a red flag with U.S. intelligence and law enforcement, according to these officials, and the communications were intercepted during routine intelligence collection targeting Russian officials and other Russian nationals known to U.S. intelligence. And among them were several senior Trump advisors that apparently, according to our sources, were regularly communicating with Russian nationals. And so that was really what caught the attention of U.S. law enforcement and U.S. intelligence officials. And officials we've been speaking with emphasize that these communications between campaign staff and representatives of foreign governments are not unusual. However, these particular communications stood out to investigators due to the frequency, the volume, and the level of the Trump advisors involved. And as we have been told by our sources, investigators have not reached a judgment on the intent of those conversations. Adding to U.S. investigators' concerns, though, were intercepted communications between Russian officials before and after the election discussing their belief that they had special access to Mr. Trump, according to law enforcement and intelligence officials we've been speaking with. So, Don, all of this was coming at a time when U.S. intelligence officials believed that Russia was trying to sway the election in favor of Donald Trump and to hurt Hillary Clinton. So within that context, that also added to the concern in the intelligence community.
Well, the question is, let's dig a little bit more deeper on this, Pamela. And be specific. Did President Trump know about these contacts? Was he briefed?
My colleague Evan Perez and I were told through our sources that both President Obama and then President-elect Trump were briefed on the details of the extensive communications between suspected Russian operatives and people associated with the Trump campaign and the Trump business. This is according to U.S. officials familiar with this matter. And the extensive contacts drew concerns of U.S. intelligence and law enforcement officials, in part because, as I pointed out, it came at a time of Russian cyber activities targeting mostly Democratic Party political organizations post-election. Intelligence briefings on Russia meddling in the U.S. elections included details of those communications, which included people involved in Mr. Trump's businesses. And these communications were gathered as part of routine U.S. intelligence collection and not because people close to Trump were being targeted. Now, the FBI and U.S. intelligence agencies continue to try to determine what the motive for these communications were. One concern, Don, was whether Trump associates were coordinating with Russian intelligence operatives. And the release of the damaging information about Hillary Clinton campaign, as you'll recall, those emails from the DNC. And so that is really of concern. And that is what intelligence officials and law enforcement officials have been focused on. As one official said, if that were the case, then that would escalate things. And so far, though, the findings have been inconclusive. And as we know, Don, just recently in late December, Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump, was speaking to the Russian ambassador, talking about sanctions. We know DOJ alerted to the White House on January 26th that Flynn was not being forthcoming about the conversation and the fact that sanctions was mentioned. And now, as we know, President Trump has asked for his resignation. So this is another huge development and gives us a better idea of the investigation that is ongoing of Trump's associates during the campaign and Russians who have been on the U.S. radar. Don?
So that's what it meant for the election. They were trying to figure out whether or not they were coordinating. And so far, there's no evidence so far of this. So is this investigation ongoing, Pamela?
It is ongoing, absolutely. There is a broader probe within the counterintelligence division of the FBI trying to figure out Russian activities in the United States and what these communications mean. What was the motive? Was there any sort of collusion going on? As I pointed out earlier, it's inconclusive, but of course investigators are looking at the bigger picture and the context of this happening during a time when the Russians were boasting to one another in intercepted communications about having access to Trump. And so all of this is sort of taken into account, and the FBI is looking at this. And as we've learned through our sources who have been talking to both Jim Sciutto, my colleague Jim Sciutto, as well as Evan Perez, this has been brought to the attention of the FBI, and they continue to look at this. And it has also been brought to the attention of Donald Trump during the briefing before he even took office, before he became officially president of the United States.
Donald Trump said he respects Vladimir Putin, even though the Russian president is a killer. Speaking to Fox News, the president appeared to place the US and Russia on the same moral plane in an interview to be broadcast before the most American of sporting events, Super Bowl LE, kicks off in Houston on Sunday. Asked by host Bill O'Reilly if he respected Putin, Trump replied, "I do respect Putin." Trump's respect for and willingness to work with Putin was a familiar trope during an election which the major U.S. intelligence agencies believe Russian intelligence sought to influence on Trump's behalf. Such beliefs prompted a fierce split between Trump and the intelligence community, which has not yet healed. The two presidents spoke by phone last weekend, a conversation reportedly much smoother than calls with leaders of allies such as Australia. A summit meeting has been mooted by both governments. Trump continued, "I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with them. He is a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not, and if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world, major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very possible I won't. He's a killer, though," O'Reilly said. "Putin's a killer. There are a lot of killers," Trump answered. "We've got a lot of killers. What, do you think our country's so innocent?" According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 36 journalists have been murdered in Russia since 1992, 23 since Putin first became president in 2000. Most famously, Anna Politkovskaya was shot dead in 2006 while investigating torture in Chechnya. The subject has arisen before in connection with Trump's view of the Russian president. In December 2015, MSNBC host Joe Scarborough told Trump, he kills journalists that don't agree with him. Trump answered, well, I think that our country does plenty of killing, too, Joe. The same week, Trump told ABC News, in all fairness to Putin, you're saying he killed people. I haven't seen that. I don't know that he has. He added, if he has killed reporters, I think that's terrible. But this isn't like somebody that's stood with a gun and he's taken the blame or he's admitted that he's killed. He's always denied it. It's never been proven that he's killed anybody, so you know you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. At least in our country he has not been proven that he's killed reporters. Trump has said he accepts reports that Russia was behind hacks against his Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton, but rejected the notion that he could not have won the White House without Russian help. Investigations into links between Trump aides and Russian actors are ongoing. Critics of Trump have often raised the subject of Putin's murderousness. The Arizona Senator John McCain, a fierce opponent of lifting sanctions on Russia, a prospect with which Trump has flirted, has said the Russian president is a murderer and a thug. Fox also said Trump answered a question from O'Reilly about his oft-stated but never evidenced belief that his defeat by nearly 3M ballots in the popular vote was caused by massive voter fraud. When you see people who are not citizens and they are on the registration rolls, it's a really bad situation, Trump was quoted as saying. Trump said he was willing to work with both Kiev and Moscow to resolve the separatist conflict in eastern Ukraine, following a telephone call with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko on Saturday. The call was the first direct contact between the two leaders since the inauguration of Trump, whose aim to improve relations with the Kremlin has alarmed Kiev while the nearly 3-year-old conflict remains unresolved. It followed fresh artillery attacks in Ukraine's Donbass region, which broke a lull in shelling at a frontline hotspot that had raised hopes the conflict's worst escalation in months was waning. We will work with Ukraine, Russia, and all other parties involved to help them restore peace along the border, Trump said in a White House statement after talking to Poroshenko.